What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to FudgeMuppet. My name is Scott, and today we are undertaking a massive project, the biggest, most extensive video we have ever made. What Fallout 76 should have been. With the release of Fallout 76, many players have been left disappointed for various reasons, and yet some have still enjoyed the game greatly, and for those people, I am truly happy. However, I would fall into the previous camp, with Fallout 76 leaving me wanting for a Fallout experience closer to the games that had come before it. Today, I want to not only talk about all the reasoning why I am disappointed, but also what I would change to make it a game that I would enjoy, and I also think most of you would also enjoy. Before I go any further, this video is huge, so all of the topics and sections of the videos will be timestamped in the description below, so you can navigate your way throughout the video. So if you do want to skip straight to our ideal version of Fallout 76, you can. Also, if you do enjoy this video, please give the video a like. It really does help us and lets us know that you guys do enjoy these videos, and share it around too. Show your friends and anyone you think who may like this video. Get into the comments too, because I want to see some awesome discussion and feedback, but please keep it civil. And also, it's probably best that you use timestamps to identify the parts you are responding to, because this is an absolute Goliath of a video. So back to what I was talking about. Our ideal Fallout game personally is a Fallout 5, a single player RPG. However, that is not the ideal Fallout 76. I am of full understanding that this game was never intended to be a single player game, a Fallout 5 if you will, and this was a co-op experience that Bethesda wanted to take a shot at. So that is what we will stick with, a theoretical Fallout 76 that blends well the desire for a co-op experience and also the desire for a Fallout RPG that delivers on the same core Fallout experience. This will be part 2 of our video. In the past, we have made videos such as the ideal Elder Scrolls 6, the ideal Fallout 4, the ideal Fallout New Orleans, the ideal Elder Scrolls Valenwood, and so on. The ideal series is basically us taking a game or theoretical game and making its template from scratch. Quick anecdote, if you go back and watch some of those, do be aware that some of them are as many as 5 years old, so they would not necessarily be our ideal version today. We've learnt a lot more and grown since then, so our opinions may have shifted, but the core desires would remain basically the same. Regardless, never before have we attempted to make an idealized version of a game with this much detail. We are going to be from the ground up redesigning Fallout 76. We will be using some basic premises, the map, the creatures, and the weapons as a basis for our version. We have made all new factions, characters, and stories, and as you can tell by the length of this video, it's going to be a lot. But if anything, we could potentially talk even more about this lore we have made. Perhaps we would make separate fanfiction lore videos on these groups if you guys wanted it. So let us know if that is something you would want to see. But holy moly, we will get to that. If you want to skip straight to part 2 now using the timestamps, you can, but it's probably best that you watch part 1 first, as it gives a lot of the reasoning for the changes we would make, and watching that may answer some of your questions about choices we made in part 2. So part 1 will be all our problems with Fallout 76, explaining why we perceive them as problems and how they have gutted much of the Fallout core experience that the other Fallout titles shared. So without further ado, I think it's best we tackle this big piece of pie and get into the video. Welcome to part 1. We have a lot to talk about. The way I see it, there are 2 overarching problems. First, there is the gameplay problems, ranging from gunplay to quests to player interaction to character creation to leveling to role-playing to the repetitive content. This group of problems is what applies to pretty much everyone, the actual gameplay, how fun the game is. The second group of problems is one that some may not care about, but a lot of people who are so invested in the franchise, like myself, do care about. This group would include story, player impact, lore, choices, the world building, and also the role-playing. Role-playing is sort of shared across both groups. If you have a look at our history, we are obsessed with the lore of these huge worlds, and it all started with builds, creating characters that with certain beliefs and skill sets that would change your experience. It's the difference between playing a recovering chem addict that finds new purpose within Caesar's Legion and a once loyal NCR soldier who in his old age has become less idealistic and more concerned with the number of caps in his pocket, leading him to help Mr. House. It's what gives these games historically such replayability. You can play many different roles, living out different lives in these made-up worlds, so the problems we have with Fallout 76 in that regard are rather extensive. There is likely to be a bit of overlap in part 1, but regardless, it's all talking about the same core problems with the game. Also, there will be minor spoilers concerning factions that are in the game, but nothing major. So let's start off with the first group, the actual game itself. Why, in our opinion, that Fallout 76 is just not as fun as the previous games. Let's begin. In Fallout 76, you begin in Vault 76. You wake up and you create your character's appearance, and that's pretty standard fare, and you get guided out of the vault amongst the random sounds of other people eating chips and dogs barking, and now you can bugger off and do your own thing. But wait a second, where was the special stats? Or maybe even traits, or anything like that? There is none. In Fallout 76, you started off with 1 in every special stat, and you simply add a special point in every level up, in addition to picking a perk card. So for an RPG, a role-playing game, you have 0 role to play as of yet. Nothing defines you from your teammates. You are all these bland, 1 in every special stat blobs. So what's the real problem here? Well, in a co-op experience, people play different roles to support each other in different ways, and this creates team synergy. A tank and a healer, a DPS and a tank, a stealth sniper covering a melee character from afar. This is the kind of co-op experience people like. This is the kind of thing that encourages people to team up. In Fallout 76, as it is, you begin with nothing to distinguish roles, and in my experience, it really isn't until you're about level 15 to 20 that any defined roles in a team can start to take shape, because by then you've modified your specials enough to form somewhat different skill sets. In previous Fallout games, you always allocated special stats at the start of the game. In Fallout 3 and New Vegas, you started with a value of 5 in each special stat, and then you could allocate 5. If you wanted more points to spend, then you would have to take them away from others. So you may give yourself 10 intelligence, but then you had to take 4 points from perception and a point from strength in order to give yourself 10 charisma as well. Obviously, this supports individual and unique builds from the get-go, which would work much better in a team game. If I wanted to be building all the weapons and healing all my teammates, I could max my intelligence and perhaps charisma too at the cost of some damage dealing or health boosting stats, versus my teammates who could lower their intelligence and charisma to become 2 dumb brutes with high strength and endurance that pound through enemies with clubs, but with me to support them. This is an example of team synergy. You need this option for polarization from the beginning. Having something like this would greatly improve people's experience from the start. Teams of 4 or teaming up with a buddy would become highly incentivized, and even without being in a team, the ability to have certain strengths and weaknesses as a solo character is far more fun in my opinion. I'd rather be able to play a dumb brute from the get-go, enjoying the benefits of higher melee damage while also dealing with the negatives of my build. It's all about compromise, but it leads to a much more fun experience in my opinion. It also makes it worthwhile to replay the game most of the time, if story and choices and such aren't lacking as they are in this game. If that's the case, then even that might not be enough. Of course, this would call for an entire restructure of the leveling system, because with that setup, you couldn't go and put points into special stats every level, or you'd max everything pretty quick. I'd even take Fallout 4's leveling over Fallout 76, where you at least have 21 points to allocate at the beginning, actually giving you the ability to make a build. Some people may say they like it better with 1 in everything, because then you can decide what they like first, but I would argue that you don't really, because when you try and play a melee character, you are experiencing the lowest powered version of one, same for all the other stats. If you were to start with high strength, you would be able to experience what a full-blown melee tank is like. An early game powered version, of course. Same goes with the other stats. I get that Bethesda may be going for a more non-committal type of play where it doesn't matter too much if you put a point in a special stat that you don't really use, but a much better system would be making players commit at the start and then provide some form of respec option. Perhaps you can buy a special DNA restructure serum from a special special vendor once or twice, and when you use it, you can respec all your character's special stats and perks. So if you've really goofed your build, you can fix it up without having to replay the whole game, which isn't even particularly a bad thing if it's a good game, but still. And from the sounds of it, it seems like Bethesda will be implementing some kind of respec special options anyways. Another quick note I would like to add is the ideal addition of traits. If you had played the OG games or Fallout New Vegas, then you would know that traits are unique perk-like choices that you could pick only at the start of the game to give you a character build and identity, both in gameplay but also in a role-playing capacity. Things like Four Eyes giving you benefits for glasses but detriments to not wearing them, or Good-Natured, which gives you bonuses to skills like medicine, science, and speech, but made skills like guns, melee, and explosives suffer. Once again, it's a character identity and polarization that allows you to fill a certain role in a role-playing game. So I would have loved to see traits, but I already knew they weren't there, was just voicing my love for traits, and I think it would improve the character creation, even if it was exactly like it is, with one in every special stat at the start. Picking 2 traits in addition would give you a little bit more of a unique feeling, and perhaps an inkling of build direction. Before I get into talking about perk cards, I want to talk about the lack of skills. Now this applies to Fallout 4 as well, and I was in no way expecting to see skills in the game, but I do want to talk about how it creates more problems than it did fix them. Obviously, there are some things skills did that still have to be done in the game. So speech used to determine your ability to persuade, and in Fallout 4, they determined that by your charisma stat alone. Gun damage used to be determined by a gun skill, hacking by a science skill, lockpicking by a lockpicking skill, so on and so forth. So what did they do? They basically turned skills into perks. Unarmed skill became the Iron Fist perk, hacking became the hacker perk, explosives became the demolition expert perk, skills became perks, and what used to be perks basically buggered off. Fallout 4 had many perks that were just skills, just boring. However, there were still some big stars, and enough unique ones, however less than existed in New Vegas. Fallout 76, of course, suffers from the same problems. A lot of the perk cards are really basic and boring. Increased damage for rifles or melee weapons, heal more with stim packs, stuff like that. There are some gems and unique ones still, probably more than Fallout 4 to be honest, so it is an improvement in that respect, but it still feels sucky when I'm encouraged to spend perk points on what are essentially skills rather than unique and funky things like goat legs, which reduces fall damage by 80%. In an idealized version, the mundane things should be relegated to skills, while perks are all unique and gameplay changing. Like I said, Fallout 76 hasn't done this any worse than Fallout 4. If anything, there's probably more variety in the perk cards, however, skills would still be much better, keeping perk cards exciting and fresh. Imagine the 2 scenarios. There is one when you level up and get all excited because you're about to pick Super Slam or Sneering Imperialist, giving your character personality, or in the other scenario, you level up and you improve your gun damage by 10% or increase your hacking level. Overall, it would feel much better if boring things like damage and hacking were relegated to skills and perks were entirely unique and helped define your character in a niche way. So that's where that is, but what about perk cards? As a concept, I like it, not because the fact they are cards or that you can switch them in and out, but because they had the promise of lots, which there seems to be. Now, like I said before, plenty of them are still pretty much skills, but then there are some like getting healing in rainy weather, or increasing the health and hunger you satisfy from canned dog food because you're a good little doggy. The reason I love lots of perks in Fallout games is because of the character variety it can offer you. It allows for so many niche and unique builds. You add points to all your special stats, picking which ones you want to put points into, but from my experience with the game, you don't really have a build as such. You have a perk card setup. As you collect many perk cards, there are a variety of setups you can swap in and out of on the fly. This can be appealing to some, but it just feels kind of cheap, never committing to an actual build. For example, going back to goat legs, you could just level up and get these perk cards, but not actually have them be perk cards that define your character, but rather you just use them almost like an item that you can temporarily equip to jump off a cliff and then swap back in whatever perk cards you use, which are applicable for most scenarios. Special stats also only determine the number of perk cards you can slot in, so perks no longer require certain stats or certain builds to utilize. This may be more of a personal thing, but like I said, if they wanted to make it more accessible, add a way for people to respec their character instead of creating the leveling system around it. My other criticism of the perk card system is that it doesn't really facilitate builds in terms of planning a character. In previous games, you were able to see every single perk that would be available in the level up menu. This allowed you to look ahead and plan your character to see what kind of build you want to become. Whereas in Fallout 76, you have no idea, and the randomness of perk card packs doesn't help either. So when you start the game, you may be putting points into certain special stats, but then later realize there are a whole bunch of cards that are useful to your playstyle, but they belong to a special stat you haven't bothered to increase. Whereas in other games from the beginning, you've been able to make a plan because you can see all the perks. If anything, this has made the idea and desire for the ability to respec even more important because you weren't able to plan out a direction for your character build. In summary, I would rather a character creation and leveling system like that of the older games, like Fallout New Vegas, where you can play a defined character. And I think if anything, it's even more important in a multiplayer co-op game because it allows you to play an actual role in your team from the get-go, rather than having to get to about level 20 before you start to become an individual member of the team. I am somewhat happy about perk cards, not because of the perk cards themselves, but ultimately the variety that the perk system brings, even if a good chunk of them are still just skills in perk form. But like I said, Fallout 4 had this problem as well. Overall, I think they have gutted a lot of the RPG character building elements and have opted for a more safe and streamlined system, which I honestly don't think appeals to anyone. It's not like skills and perks are complicated. The people who are playing the Fallout games are generally over the age of 12. I could understand it when I was 13, so when you finally get to part 2 of this video where we talk about character creation and leveling, you will see what we would want, but you can probably put 2 and 2 together after this last piece. But anyways, on to the next one. Quests make up a huge portion of what you do in Fallout games. They are crucial to an RPG. They exist so your character can do them in their own way and level up, whether that be kill everyone, bribe a guy to do the dirty work, sneak in the back and steal the goods, or switch sides and betray the quest giver. Every single choice that you make in these quests gives you a sense of identity, a role in a role-playing game, an RPG, as does the build you play and the factions you join. Fallout 76 has none of this. There is, from the vast amount I have played, practically no choice. Every single quest is usually a variation of go here, kill this, or retrieve this, or build this, then return, listen to robot or holotape, rinse and repeat. Now, like I said before, there are a few exceptions and little standout objectives. Sometimes they attempt little funny objectives, but they often fall flat. Cleaning up beer bottles as a quest objective is purely mundane. It's not fun at all. Now, I won't pretend that most RPGs don't have lots of very similar quest types. You can only skin a cat so many ways, but it's the meaning behind doing these quests that are lacking. Most of the time you just aren't invested in the story. Killing a bunch of enemies because a holotape of a dead guy says to is just not as satisfying. It also makes little sense in the context of the character. So you're the best and brightest of America, put into a vault, you finally emerge, and the first thing you do is start doing random quests for borderline dysfunctional robots and holotapes of dead men? How about rebuilding civilization? And there are some quests that have you look for survivors, but all that suspense is completely killed because Todd flat out told us that every human is a real player, or they're dead. In the main story, you also technically join multiple factions, but it never matches the significance it had in previous games. When you join the Brotherhood or Responders or the Enclave, you are joining a dead faction, and it is also forced upon you in the main quest. It wasn't even a choice. You weren't swayed by their ideals, you were just following holotapes and robots until you did enough terminal tests to become a member of the Brotherhood. Quests in previous games, even the more boring fetchy ones, were made thousands of times better because of the characters, the stories, the choices, and the role-playing surrounding it. Fallout 76 gutted all of the meaning of questing beyond its utility of quest rewards. The motivation to do these quests is purely reward-oriented most of the time. The reason stories have actual characters is because they are relatable. People actually empathize with other humans or human-like sentience. Malfunctioning toasters and holotapes don't take the cake. If you think back to your favorite quests from any of the Fallout games, and probably all RPGs, they all have actual characters. Imagine the beginning of Fallout New Vegas when you wake up in Gutstrings and are later thrust into the conflict of powder gangers and the town. Well, imagine that instead of the different characters in the town, there are holotapes with recordings of dead people who used to live there, and their dying wish is that you defend Gutstrings from a horde of mole rats. Why? Why would I care about defending a ghost town from mole rats at the wishes of some dead people that I never even knew? Why would I risk my life? No other reason than I'm going to get some experience. Whereas in New Vegas, you have to think and pick a choice based on who you are as a character and what these people have done for you. You would get up and defend Gutstrings because Doc Mitchell healed you up when you were nearly dead. Sunny Smiles showed you the ropes and gave you a free gun. The townspeople have been friendly to you, and perhaps your character has a knight in shining armor complex. But there is a reason to protect the town. Or if you were to choose, there is a reason to take over the town with the powder gangers. You have emotional investment, even if small, but you actually consider your choices and a story is forming. Whereas in the Fallout 76 equivalent, you are risking your life protecting a town full of dead people just because loot and leveling. Even then, it is far more effective to just run around killing creatures to level up in Fallout 76. So many of the quests have such poor motivations, it's just such a shame. And a big thing seriously is the lack of human NPCs. They've really shot themselves in the foot here. I will go into this more in a later section, and of course, our ideal Fallout 76 would feature many living NPCs, actual worthwhile characters. But overall, the quests are severely lacking most of the time, with most of them feeling mundane and tedious. Another thing this game has a big problem with is the ridiculous quest spam. For such a huge world, supposedly full of things to see, why are you constantly pulling me in 15 different directions? It's like they were scared of potentially being criticized for a lack of content or something, so they have to constantly fill your UI with miscellaneous quests, events, dailies, listen to this radio, do this thing, and I didn't even start the quest. It's Preston Garvey on steroids. Ironically, the most fun I've had is just very slowly looking through an interesting location, just looking at it aesthetically. Not that doing that is even heaps of fun or anything, it's just miles better than the hot garbage most of the quests are. So what else is there to do in Fallout 76 besides questing, which usually makes up the brunt of an RPG? Well, there is PvP and also base building and crafting. First, let's talk PvP. In its current state, it is pointless. If two people are willing to fight, it can be fun enough, but the incentive to is really poor. I'd have 100 times more fun having a quickscope deathmatch in Modern Warfare 2. In Fallout 76, as other people have pointed out, the one who initiates PvP will very often get blown away and lose, mainly because until the other person responds with fire, they are borderline immune to damage. So you could come and shoot me full of bullets, I then easily heal the nerf to damage, go right up to your face, and blow you away with a shotgun at full damage because I have now accepted the fight. The cap rewards are also piss poor, and at best you get to steal a bunch of their junk. But look at it this way. If I want to play a raider, say, and I see a guy and I want to ambush and kill him, what do I stand to gain and what do I stand to lose? Well, I stand to get a few caps, maybe some junk if he has some, and the satisfaction of killing a real player. What do I stand to lose? A metric ton of bullets and resources, especially if it takes a while for them to fire back and accept, that is if they do at all, and my weapons will degrade and bullets waste. And I may have to use valuable healing items, and I may possibly die because they have the upper hand because I initiated, so I may lose all my junk. So what's the point? It's not even like most Fallout players care about PvP. PvP in Fallout 76 is just a weak source experience that is better pretty much in every other multiplayer game I have ever played. The premise of a co-op Fallout game is interesting, and questing with your friends has always been the appealing part of that idea. Imagine if New Vegas was co-op and you and your friend became a pair of raiders that would ambush NCR trading caravans and bring back resources back to your base together. That's the kind of multiplayer Fallout people are interested in, not some near broken PvP mess. And you can tell from playing the game, no one wants to fight. Everyone is just off doing their own thing, trying to play Fallout like an RPG. It's a mess, which is why our ideal Fallout 76 in Part 2, there is no PvP as such. It would be a co-op RPG built around a multiplayer experience while still delivering role-playing, story, and characters, the important things in a Fallout game. So, base building and crafting. Wow, I hope you like it because crafting is a lot of this game. Resource management and junk collecting is huge. You need it for repairing and crafting your weapons, and the camp is actually incredibly useful. It's actually a feature I like about the game. It feels really fun setting up a little base with your friends anywhere, but I think they've really dropped the ball here. In fact, they have slam dunked it right into the hoop that says Scrapathon the game. This game is built around collecting junk. If you refuse to do it, you will be punished, and severely. As far as I'm aware, you can't repair your weapons without it. It's not like you can be a rich dude, charisma-focused character who can just pay people to repair their weapons, or just pay for resources. I mean, you can, but why the hell would you? The prices the robots sell it for are really expensive. It's a lot easier to just find it. People often joke about Fallout 76, taking the complaints about Fallout 4 and turning it into a game, but sometimes it feels not too far from the truth. Fallout 4 itself had many cookie-cutter settlements for you to build on, which could have been really cool, unique places filled with interesting quests and characters. Some people hated the emphasis on crafting and settlement building in place of actual quests and characters. So they've doubled down and given you no characters, besides some robots and the odd exception like a super mutant trader, and given you an absolute necessity for junk collection. And this usually just leads to most people getting pissed off because they are over-encumbered or their stash is full. I'm usually insanely OCD about inventory management, and even I sometimes got to the point where it's like, damn, better drop some stuff because I really need these springs because my gun needs to be repaired. It's just a lot more mundane crap to do. Remember back in the day when you'd play a Fallout game, explore an area because the leader of your faction sent you there, plus there may be some cool enemies and a unique weapon or piece of armor hidden away, plus a cool quest line? Well, now instead you go into an area because a holotape told you, and you spend 40% of your time looking for cans made of aluminium. Welcome to Fallout Arts and Crafts, the game. Another small complaint is how the actual crafting of mods and weapons works. In Fallout 4 you could see all that is possible to make, so you could work towards certain things, and you saw the potential of each weapon, which helped you decide whether you want to keep it or not. Whereas in this you have to break down weapons to learn mods, or find the mods, or learn the recipe. But to be honest, I don't find it that common. I think I'd rather be able to see all the options for crafting straight off the bat instead of having to learn a billion recipes. I don't care about some cranberry sweet tea recipe. I want a suppressor for my sniper rifle, goddammit. Honestly, if you don't like crafting and resource collecting, you are in for a rough ride. I'd be willing to forgive how crucial they made crafting if there was an amazing story and good quests and characters that tie it together, but they just aren't there. Don't get me wrong, I do like crafting as an optional thing. It's just, I don't really like it as the only thing and sole purpose of the game. For a so-called RPG, this game features little to no role-playing. And how could it? There is zero dialogue for you to express your character in the world, zero choices for you to make in the game. You simply just follow objectives. Zero living factions to join and get behind their ideology. We talk about this more in the next section, and there is no character creation beyond customizing your appearance, which you can just change at any time anyways. Just flip your gender, race, and face anytime in the menu. They didn't even try and integrate it into the world in any ways. Even if there was an auto doc that does plastic surgery, it would make more sense, but regardless, back on track. Role-playing, there is none. Like I discussed in the character creation and leveling section, there is nothing that sets you apart from anyone else when you start the game other than what you look like, and you don't really feel distinct statistically until level 15 to 20. So for a game franchise that has historically been a role-playing game, to have no role-playing is a big problem. Bethesda in the lead up to 76's release heavily implied that it would still be like the Fallout games that you enjoyed, delivering a Fallout quality experience but through holotapes and robots, which we thought was sketchy when we first heard that, but we wanted to have a little faith. But that essentially means we'd be getting a Fallout experience like before in some capacity. Now, I am also not saying it's impossible to roleplay. You can roleplay. But you can roleplay in almost any game using your imagination. The problem is the game that sells itself as an RPG does not facilitate role-playing at all. For example, I could team up with my friends in Call of Duty Black Ops role-playing a squad leader and my friends the squad. I could be yelling Echo Bravo Charlie enemy on your 6 Tango down, playing the role of a squad leader. Meanwhile, everyone in the game chat would think my friends and I are crazy, because it kinda is. But this doesn't mean that Black Ops is a role-playing game just because I can technically roleplay and pretend. Whereas in a game that facilitates role-playing with actual role-playing mechanics like thorough character creation, choice, dialogue, factions, and the ability to play a certain character. In this, it is completely normal. Look at Fallout 4, for example, the game of the franchise with the least amount of choice and the least amount of role-playing, until Fallout 76 came along, that is. You are basically always a pre-war military veteran or lawyer who is looking for his or her son, which makes it hard to make different backstories, but still, you could work with it. You could play a Minutemen General, or a Brotherhood of Steel Paladin, or a chem-crazy pyromaniac. We did it with many of our Fallout 4 builds, but it was much harder to work with than previous games like Fallout New Vegas, where each playthrough allowed you to play a truly individual character where you could really be whoever you wanted. The game's mechanics allowed you to be a mentally handicapped brute, and the dialogue would change and people would react to you differently, or you could be an intellectual who hates mutants and ghouls. The list goes on. Dialogue, choices, faction alignment, all of these things factored into creating a role-playing experience for the player. But with Fallout 4, it had its faults, making it hard to be evil and anything other than a worried father or mother. Why am I talking about Fallout 4, you ask? For perspective, because Fallout 76 has 1%, if that, the role-playing of Fallout 4, which was already reduced significantly since the previous entries in the series. Outside of what you can wear and weapons you can use, plus some of the perk cards, there are no game mechanics that facilitate role-playing. Yes, there are some cool perk cards that can make you stand out slightly, but being able to pick certain perks or unique benefits doesn't cut it. The Witcher 3 is not a fantastic RPG because you can choose to have skills focusing on magic or swords. It's a great RPG because of the fantastic story, the world, the quests, the choices you can make. Choice is a cornerstone of a role-playing experience, and there is no choice. You even have to join all the main factions who aren't even alive as part of the main story in Fallout 76. I mean, even if the factions were their own separate quest lines, you would at least be able to do some and not the others, perhaps joining the Responders and not the Enclave and so on. However, of course, without the impact of living members, it would be hard for it to mean anything, but let's move on to the next section of the video where we talk about that in more detail. So the next big thing we have to talk about is the world building and NPCs, also atmosphere and enemies. Now, I have close to fully explored the map. I may have not gone through every single cupboard or walked into every single building, but I have walked and looked at the majority of it, giving me a pretty good understanding of the game world. Now, to 76's credit, there are some beautiful parts and some really fresh environments. In my beta impressions video, a lot to say about Fallout 76. In fact, I credited the game with a really cool physical world. Now, that statement remains true to a degree, but definitely to a lesser extent. Earlier in the game, as I said about the beta, you do get this cool atmosphere of a huge, unexplored wasteland world with crazy new environments, and because I had only had a taste, it felt much more expansive than it was. When you are hit with the reality, the atmosphere kind of fades away. When I first entered the eastern swampy area called the Mire, I was hyped. It had these huge trees and it felt really atmospheric, but there is nothing else to carry that feeling. I was expecting this brand new location filled with brand new enemies and an entirely different atmosphere, but the disappointment, which also reigns for most areas, is that it's the same place with a different coat of paint. It's still filled with scorched and super mutants, with the occasional cricket and mirelurk thrown in for some diversity. This is mostly the same for everywhere in Fallout 76. The physical location may be unique, but it is a facade, because the whole area carries the same mundane quest experience and the same copy-pasted enemies, which also lack personality. Even in the mining mountainous area where the mole men are, there are only there sometimes, because many of the locations they were in, upon returning to, I just found that they were super mutants or scorched. Maybe they were going for variety by mixing up the enemy types that can spawn in each area, but what it resulted in was making it feel the same everywhere. They would be much better off restraining enemy types to certain areas, giving each area an individual feeling. Look at Fallout New Vegas, for example. I'll admit, everywhere looks physically very samey. One of its faults is that it looks very barren. There's lots of sand, dirt, and rocks. So physically, it doesn't look like much. But how come every area stands out so much in my head? It's because of what's in the areas and the atmosphere that is created in these areas that sets them apart. For sure, I would rather a map with lots of aesthetic diversity like Fallout 76, but that game has no substance, no depth. It's all scorched and super mutants, tied together with boring, mundane objectives. A huge advantage of New Vegas over 76 in this regard is that there is actual civilization and human NPCs, but still, even if you just look at the types of enemies. So you start off in Gutstrings, and just north of there is an area dominated by Cazadors. To the east, there is a super dangerous area with Deathclaws called Quarry Junction, and fewer Deathclaws can be seen spreading from that area. Black Mountain is covered in super mutants, and there is a really good reason for them being there. The Powder Gangers dominate the road south to Prim because they have taken over the correctional facility nearby. Further south of Prim, you see a deserty area dominated by ants and scorpions, but also a raider gang called the Jackals. As you continue around, you come into conflict with another gang called the Vipers. Also, you see the damage of Caesar's Legion, and you feel like you're starting to get closer to the lines of conflict in the Legion vs NCR war. Searchlight has just been hit with a radiation device, causing ghouls to spread from there. The front line around Hoover Dam is characterized by the conflict between NCR and Legion, but then as you go west of New Vegas, you start seeing Fiends, which are drugged up raiders based out of Vault 3, and you see the NCR patrolling and struggling with them. Without even mentioning all of it in detail, you see how there is an atmosphere created just through the enemies that are there. It's world building. All of the enemies have reasons for being there, and they are dealing with their own conflicts, and it makes it feel very believable. Even on the surface, it creates an identity for each area, whereas in 76 you have a far more diverse physical world, yet it is filled with the same copy-pasted enemies with zero personality. Diseased humans called the Scorched may as well just be zombies with guns, and super mutants in the past have been interesting, but Bethesda continues to cheapen them by overusing them and just throwing them in the lore. Apparently all the water was filled with FEV pre-war, and therefore super mutants, in contrast to the very stringent and specific conditions that super mutants were made with previously in the lore. Anyways, I'll get to lore a little bit later. The game does have some unique enemies, and there are exceptions to this criticism. For example, the density of Scorch Beasts in the Cranberry Bog area near the fissure sites is cool, and they are a really cool new enemy. It makes the area feel very dangerous. But for most of the map, the new unique enemy types like Snellygasters and Megasloths have remained extremely rare or unseen for me, with only Scorched and super mutants to fill their shoes. Now, how about factions? There is some sense of world with the dead factions, but what it really comes down to is that the Responders had a society here, oh, and they're dead. And the Brotherhood were here, oh, but they're dead too. Oh, and the Enclave, oh, no, they're dead. There is a reason characters are alive in books, movies, games, and other media, because it is very hard to relate to dead people. This is huge for 76. No real NPCs has really hurt it. Honestly, if you keep 76 the same as it is, but make the Brotherhood, Enclave, and Responders living factions, not even characters you can have intense dialogue with, just the press A to interact, gimme a quest kind of thing, the game would have 10 times more personality, and people wouldn't be as upset. I am in no way saying that that is good or optimal, but it's much better than we have now. One of the simplest ways it helps is that it creates real motivation and meaning. Why am I doing this quest? Oh, because the leader of the Responders is trying to secure resources for the village. Versus, why am I doing this quest? Oh, because a holotape of a dead person said to take this exam and become a fireman. Characters help create a world. Pretty much every single game, movie, book, etc., all that has characters that you can identify with. And yes, there are robots and dead people through holotapes, but they just don't cut it. Imagine you took Star Wars and replaced every single character with a battle droid. I can guarantee you will not care about it. Look at Warfare, for example. Humans fighting humans is emotional, tragic, and meaningful because you can relate not only to the struggles of one side, but also the other. You can empathize with both. Stories to explore are abundant, dealing with tragedy and trauma, dehumanizing the enemy, etc., etc. The list would go on. But now instead, imagine it's drones and robots versus robots and drones. Who cares? It's all just machinery. You don't connect to them. They're tools. It doesn't matter if a robot dies, just fix it later or build a new one. But when a human dies, it has a permanency, and you can relate to their struggles. Without getting too off topics, the point I am trying to get across is that with living humans or human-like characters, even if you had super mutants or ghouls, you would have a lot more emotional investment and reaction to all of the quests and the world itself. And before we get to pointing out things like Valentine in Fallout 4 was a robot and he had lots of personality, yes, this is true, because he is the closest thing to a replication of a human, a synth. There is a reason it is easy to care about Valentine far more than caring about Codsworth or C-3PO from Star Wars. The more human-like the non-human character is, the more you will relate to them. Most of the robots of 76 are just machines, devoid of substance. The sad thing about factions is that I may actually care about the responders and their cause if they were alive. I'm just not going to get up in arms about defending the Roman Empire, because they're a dead and long gone faction. I was never part of their cause. I hope you can see my point. This next conversation is a big one to have. Something I want to preface this whole problem with is the idea that just because something could happen doesn't mean it should happen. What I mean by this is just because something is technically plausible doesn't mean they should do it, or that it would be a good piece of law to do so. The explanations for the existence of super mutants and the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 76 are ridiculously contrived at best. These kinds of rewrites and add-ons to the lore are done solely for brand recognition. People like the Brotherhood of Steel, therefore they have to be in the game. Super mutants are a familiar enemy, let's just put them in the game. Same goes with caps as currency. Originally, caps had an extensive explanation as to why they were the medium used as currency on the West Coast, and 200 years later, it's feasible that this currency has reached the East Coast. However, 25 years after the war, the societies of the Appalachia also came up with caps, however unlikely. Once again, the tight time frame makes the game suffer, but fine, let's just go with that premise. Then why the hell do we know anything about it? Why do we just start collecting bottle caps and rock on up to robot vendors paying with caps? The character you play would have zero idea that this is the currency. There was no one alive to tell them. There is no economy. Regardless, people recognize caps and it's a Fallout thing. It's all marketing at the cost of lore integrity. And like I said in a previous video, an internal consistency is important for make-believe worlds because that is what makes them so believable and really sucks you into them. It's what allows you to live another life almost. So when isolationist factions like the Brotherhood of Steel on the other side of America start setting up more chapters of the Brotherhood by having a good old chat on the radio with some chick the leader knew on the other side of the country, it feels worse. Then that chick gets the exact same equipment, uses the same symbols and restructures her entire unit, taking on an ideology over the phone. For all the games, you are led to believe that the Brotherhood is a certain way, but then this is undermined solely so that they can have them in Fallout 76 for brand recognition. Don't make a cool new faction. No, this game needs rehashes, and you can tell that this game is ridiculously lazy. Look at the port of Far Harbor creatures straight into Fallout 76. Fog crawlers, gulpers, giant hermit crabs, anglers, all imported. These were creatures talked about in Far Harbor as if they were unique and particular to the island of Far Harbor. Especially the fog crawlers. Why the hell would they be known as fog crawlers in 76 without the mysterious fog that looms over Far Harbor? I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think West Virginia, being an inland state, is home to anglerfish or hermit crabs, let alone the mutated version of them. This is just an example of assets copy-pasted. They just crammed this cash grab with as many assets as they could from previous games just to cut corners. It's lazy, and yes, people will do their best to rationalize away Bethesda's shitty lore decisions, which is what I would do as well, but it gets to a point where it gets so ridiculous, so lazy, that it just feels hopeless. Even the general premise feels weird, like you enter the wasteland and everyone is dead. And I'm not talking skeletons or anything like that. I'm talking dead bodies of raiders, responders, Brotherhood members that are at most weeks old. According to Google, maggots can consume 60% of a human body in under 7 days. And these human bodies lying around dead are pretty intact, which almost gives me the impression of merely days old. It's also convenient that everyone is dead just for the gimmick of every living human is a player character. Even the premise of this game being a mere 25 years after the Great War is contrived. In the old lore, it's said that rivers and oceans around the world were contaminated with the resulting radioactive fallout released by the relatively low-yield nuclear weapons used by all sides, and the climate changed horrifically. All the regions of Earth suffered from a single permanent season once the initial dust blasted into the atmosphere by the nuclear explosions had settled, a scorching, radioactive desert summer. And if you look at West Virginia, it looks pretty fresh and not very scorching. One of my problems is the inconsistency of the map. There are intensely mutated creatures all around the place, but then everything else is green and fresh as a daisy. Where is the scorching summer? What I am saying is that surely the foliage is affected in some way by global nuclear catastrophe, even just the ash clouds that would result from so many bombs. China, America, the entire world was practically bombed to dust. This would do serious damage. This is not just a Chernobyl meltdown, it's a global nuclear war. Now, hundreds of years later, I would easily buy that there's heaps of vegetation in pristine condition, plants are resilient, but not that resistant against atomic fire, and ash clouds that practically block out the sun, which plants need to live. Fallout 4 is set hundreds of years after the Great War, and even that doesn't look as fresh. It just feels inconsistent to me, and once again, you will be able to justify it in some way, in some twist, but why did they do it? Oh yeah, just because we want some green here. We need lots of environment diversity to cover up the fact that this game is boring and generic under the surface. Imagine for a second that Fallout 76 was one big homogeneous environment similar to New Vegas, a big desert, or Fallout 3, a big blown up city and wasteland. It would be a detectably terrible game, not that it already isn't. The other Fallouts are fantastic games, even with their very samey physical environments. It's just Fallout 76 tries to hide its blandness with different coats of paint. Toxic paint, mining paint, cranberry bog paint, swamp paint, and lush forest paint. Done. Now, I am in no way saying that environment diversity is a bad thing. It's a good thing. It just sucks because it doesn't seem that lore-friendly, and it's just covering up a bland world filled with mundane quests, scorched, and super mutants. Another point is ghouls. The Appalachia is filled with plenty of exclusively feral ghouls, but where are all the sentient ones? It is a concern for ghouls that over time their brains will degenerate and they become feral, but this is a concern of ghouls from Fallout 1 onwards, Fallout 1 being set 84 years after the Great War, so I would assume that over time, more and more of the ghoul population would become feral, meaning if you turned back the clock, like Fallout 76 being only 25 years after the war, that there would be saner, non-feral sentient ghouls about. But instead, there are droves of ferals, which is flawed anyways. The premise of the Appalachia looking so fresh and dandy is that it was not hit directly with nuclear missiles. So where is the intense and prolonged radiation that is needed to create these ghouls? There are cases of ghouls being created instantaneously in other games, like Moira if you nuke Megaton or Camp Searchlight in the Mojave, but still, there was no instantaneous extreme dose of radiation to transform the population of West Virginia into the innumerable feral ghouls that you encounter. It's not lore-friendly, and I imagine the same goes for all of the heavily mutated creatures. What bothers me about the game is that historically in the franchise, it is implied that the mutated creatures have been developed by a radioactive wasteland over time. But in West Virginia, we aren't in a radioactive wasteland, and there hasn't been a whole lot of time. So many issues could have simply been avoided by setting the game 80 or 100 years after the war, more time for plant life to recover, more time for mutation, etc. and so forth. And it was all done for the meme of being one of the first to emerge, no other human NPCs. But that feeling is all lost anyways because the Responders and Raiders and Brotherhood were all frolicking around before you, so the impact just isn't the same, dying conveniently a short time before you emerge. I am sure as we discover more and more, we'll find more cheap rationalizations and lore that seems inconsistent with the universe, but for now I think we hit enough to get the point across. In part 2 of this video, we'll be making it as lore-friendly as possible with plenty of fresh lore, not just rehashing things for the sake of brand. Bethesda, people will buy Fallout, even if there is no Brotherhood of Steel, so long as the game is good. You can add to your brand. Before New Vegas, there was no Caesar's Legion. There was no iconic NCR Ranger. These were all New Vegas's creations. They added to the brand. Now the NCR Ranger is one of the most iconic Fallout figures. Please come up with new ideas. Expand the world. Stop rehashing it. This is the last minor point I want to talk about Fallout 76 before I move on to our ideal Fallout 76 in part 2. Bethesda marketed the hell out of Fallout 76, if only they allocated a whole bunch of that marketing budget towards making the game good. If the product is good, it will sell itself. You could have half the marketing effort and get 100 times the results by making a really good game. The whole beta thing was a decision made to help drum up pre-orders. They obviously couldn't fix anything in that short time between beta and launch, but if anything, I think this backfired hugely and would have lost them many sales. The beta revealed the extremely poor state of the game before the release and turned everyone's opinions sour. But that's just a little anecdote. My real problem here is that they are desperate to turn Fallout into some kind of meme. Just look at the tone of previous Fallout trailers and compare it to the meme that is the live action trailer. Oh, look how happy she is shooting enemies. Yeah, gang, look how cool this is. No, the little Deathclaw tried to kill him, but he got his feeties burnt. The tone is awful. Coming from all the previous games, which to varying degrees have tried to establish the grimness and struggles of a post-apocalyptic world. When you play the game, so much of the time it feels like nothing is taken seriously, which makes it really hard for me to take seriously. In the main quest, you meet a robot called Rose, and she is the most annoying meme character, sending you on mundane quests for her own stupid reasons. Like for instance, sending you to befriend a Deathclaw, and then there's this big over-the-top reaction when you go and do it and try and befriend it. It's like, oh, I didn't know the Deathclaw was going to try and kill me. Fallout games have always had humor, mostly a dark humor, but there has always been wacky and zany features, but it used them sparingly and took them seriously. The game, the characters in the world treated it as normal. They didn't turn it into some kind of meme. Recruiting a sex bot called Fisto in New Vegas for the Atomic Wrangler is funny, but it makes sense in the context of the world and it is taken seriously. The quest giver genuinely wants a sex robot for personal use and of course as a money-making method for his business. It makes sense. Unlike Rose sending you to do all these tasks because, oh, it's so hilarious. It feels pointless. In Fallout 4, a bunch of robots on the US Constitution are hell-bent on fighting the English and they want to fly their ship further. That's a funny premise, but then there is a conflict with the scavengers which gives the quest meaning. The scavengers are looking at it for resources. The scavengers aren't doing Fortnite dances outside saying, hey gang, isn't this just the craziest thing? They are very seriously trying to take the resources while also realizing it's a weird situation, but it's taken seriously. It's not like Fallout 76 where it is setting a table with cutlery or cleaning up beer bottles. Do they think that's funny and quirky? Look at Fallout 3, where Little Lamplight is a society run exclusively by kids, and if you get too old, they send you to Big Town. This sounds like a crazy and funny premise, but it's taken very seriously. To quote Todd Howard himself, it just works. The game treats itself as real. It doesn't meme it. Effort is put into it and it feels like a believable part of the world, not something they just inserted into a game purely for meme value. Their emphasis on photo mode was another red flag. Now this is not to say photo mode is bad, it's actually really cool and fun, but it's mainly a marketing tool with utility for the user. Games like Spider-Man, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Red Dead Redemption 2 have all had photo mode, among many others. People take photos and share them online, promoting the game for free, which I'm all for. But it seems Bethesda has taken the emphasis on being able to emote and take photos next to your cool creations too far. They have built this game as a marketing tool first and a game second. There is no reason they couldn't make an awesome co-op story RPG, a game that is actually good, and then include a photo mode. I have nothing against it, it's just I have a good feeling that Bethesda has built their game so hard around making it marketable and long-lasting, they forgot to make an actually good game, which would help sell it. The product matters. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of part 1. Pretty much all of the problems we have with Fallout 76. In summary, Fallout 76 is a mess in terms of gameplay, lore, and even all the technical issues that I've completely neglected to talk about. Because even if this was the smoothest running game to ever exist, it would still be total weak sauce. Glitches and bugs aren't the problem. The game is flawed on a fundamental level. I think in a quote by Tim Kaine, one of the founding fathers of the Fallout franchise, it really highlights what the appeal of Fallout really is versus what Bethesda has made it into. My idea is to explore more of the world and more of the ethics of a post-nuclear world, not to make a better plasma gun. Now, this is not to say that we don't all love a better plasma gun, but story, characters, world, lore, role-playing choices, this all takes priority. Sure, we love cool things, everyone does, and ideally I would want more. Diverse environments, variety of weapons, lots of assets. This is all good thinking, but look at the opportunity cost. Many fans would be happier if this was just a giant Fallout 4 DLC that just adds a metric ton of new weapons, armor, and enemies into their already existing game so they can still play a somewhat RPG. Aesthetically, there's a lot to love, but the fact that I can use a crossbow isn't going to be enough to make me love the game. Let me use a crossbow in a single-player Fallout RPG or even a co-op multiplayer RPG, just a good Fallout game, and I'll be all over it. RPGs need depth if you want players to get into it. You have to give them more than just lots of new weapons and lots of new assets. I think Bethesda has largely misunderstood why people fell in love with Fallout. Some people may say I'm just hating and this isn't true. The reason I want to critique this game, the reason I wanted to make this video, is for Bethesda to learn from their mistakes. I don't want Bethesda to become some low-effort developer making cash grabs, and if they get punished for making games like 76, then they will hopefully improve. Whereas if they make a buttload of cash and people just blindly support it, then you can expect them to want to do this again. I'm just a guy who's really damn passionate about open world role-playing games, along with the rest of the guys at FudgeMuppet, and I know many of you viewers are as well. I wanted Fallout 76 to be this amazing new Fallout game, whether multiplayer or not. I don't want their games to fail, but the verdict is in, and this game is far from good. So guys, if you enjoyed the video thus far, give it a like and share it around and hold your horses, because we're about to enter the most exciting part of the video, Part 2, the ideal Fallout 76, or at least our ideal Fallout 76, which with you can agree or disagree. But guys, this has been a massive project of ours, and as you can see, it's an example of our commitment to the Fallout franchise, and we want to provide solutions, not just, quote, hate on the game. So sit back, ladies and gentlemen, and watch us design a game. Hope you enjoy. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the fun part. If you watched all of part 1, then you will understand most of our decision making and reasoning for designing this ideal version of Fallout 76. Even if you skipped straight to it, you should still gather why and enjoy the video. This is going to be about the same length as part 1, so you may want to grab a drink and clear your schedule. Let's begin. Now, like we said before, the basic premise of our ideal Fallout 76 is that it is a Fallout game, an RPG with stories, side quests, societies, factions, characters, and companions, but it is also a co-op experience. The ideal Fallout 76 can be played single player and enjoyed like any other Fallout game. It does not revolve around the idea of co-op play. This is simply an additional feature with all of the role-playing considerations. Bear this goal in mind. If you went back to the original trailer for 76, you can really feel a Fallout game in there and the potential. So watch the trailer and imagine this is the game you're going to get. We are excited by the idea of potentially creating our own fanfiction lore videos that go into even more ridiculous depth about these factions and characters that we've made, filled with all the stuff we couldn't possibly put in this video because it would make it ridiculously long. I'm talking out of this world long. Also, remember in the description below there is an extensive list of timestamps where you can go to any topic in the video from part 1 or part 2. Country Roads will still be the mascot theme. It's a really nice song for the game. So the original Fallout 76 is set 25 years after the Great War, the nuclear apocalypse. To me, the appearance of Appalachia does not feel consistent with the idea of being 25 years after the world was consumed by atomic fire and radiation, resulting in a constant scorching summer for many years. The ideal Fallout 76 is set in the year 2237, 160 years after the devastation of the world as it was consumed by nuclear fire. This is also 4 years before the events of Fallout 2 take place, but of course, that is all happening on the West Coast. We are still here in Appalachia. Now, 160 years after the war, to me, makes more sense given the environment's lushness. Appalachia at this time is a land that has been inhabited for quite some time. When you leave the vault, you will be entering a world that has however, survived and sometimes thrived for over 100 years post-war. Some tried to rebuild society, maintaining towns and supporting their civilizations with agriculture. Others regressed to the Stone Age, becoming tribes of so-called savages, but with access to weaponry you would not want them to have. There will be a variety of different factions, most of which you can join or at the very least help, and you will learn more about these in the world building section. Fallout 76 as it is feels bland, empty, and pointless. We want to do the complete opposite. And remember, this game is one that will play almost entirely like a single player game, but can be done with friends who also can have story impact. But before we move on to all of the creative stuff, we have to talk about the technical side of things with co-op. I've mentioned before in other videos that it would be a neat idea to be playing co-op with a friend and then you decide to go with different factions and end up fighting each other. Now, while this is cool in thought, I feel in practice it creates too many problems that aren't worth the potential payoff. Like we have said before, a Fallout game with multiplayer shouldn't be about PvP. People want to team up with their friends in a post-apocalyptic world. There will always be better games than Fallout for shooting your friends. So before I go into detail about the story opening and how it starts, you are still going to be a Vault Dweller along with your co-op buddies if you desire. Our ideal Fallout 76 has up to 4-player co-op, but the important thing we had to consider is whether this is a drop-in or drop-out kind of style play. And to be honest, if we wanted the story and the world to be better, there has to be a few conditions. The main one being that you have to start and finish the game with the same particular players. If you create a save with you and your friends, you have to play it all together. You can't continue playing the save file without your friends, otherwise they'd be able to progress the story without you, and then when you come back, you're just sitting there thinking what the hell just happened, all of these quests have been completed, where are we at in the story? There's just a lot of problems. You can always start a single player game on the side, and of course this game will have vast replayability, so it's incentivized. The reason we did this is because we encountered too many problems with the drop-in, drop-out style play. Problems being anyone but the host can't make any meaningful decisions, they're just basically combat lackeys, and there are problems like, say your friend just comes into your game and kills a whole town, ruining it for you, or takes a unique weapon from your game world and then just leaves. There are a lot of problems which we can discuss down below. It would be a co-op experience akin to games like Divinity Original Sin 2. To finish a game requires a good amount of commitment from the players involved, and ideally, when playing a co-op game with friends, you want to be playing as a team working for the same goals anyways, but it feels cheaper if you just can't have any impact. So things like dialogue will all be text-based for the players. Like previous Fallout games, the NPCs are voice acted, but not the player characters. Players can do dialogue by themselves and accept quests by themselves, but they can join dialogue together and both engage in it if you coordinate and go to a character together. Say you and your team enter a conversation and there are all 4 players. You will all be presented with dialogue options. You can choose to say nothing, so perhaps you have a charisma character that does all the talking in your team, so you let them take the reins. Or perhaps you want your teammate with high strength to intimidate someone. Or perhaps you feel strongly about something and you choose a dialogue option, but a teammate also does. What will happen then is a dice roll based on various mechanics, resulting in one player with the highest number, and they get to say what they chose. Obviously, there is no dice roll if you and your friends choose to just let one person speak, choosing the say nothing response. This will be the same for meaningful dialogue choices like joining factions or doing certain quests certain ways. You and your friends could all agree, or instead you could choose to vote another way. At the end of the day, you and your friends are treated as a gang or group, all affiliated with each other. If one of you declares war on another faction, the people of the Appalachia will consider your team on your side. Your character's highest loyalty is to your team, your fellow Vault Dwellers, for whatever role-playing reason that you choose. But what one of your team does reflects poorly or positively on you. The quest log is also shared, which yes, could be annoying if your friend goes and does all the dialogue without you, but this is a co-op game. You are supposed to be coordinating and working together. Same goes with unique weapons and gear. You should be in a team going, hey Brian, I just found this unique sniper. It works really well for you. Do you have any power armor that I could use for my character? It's teamwork, you know? I'll be talking all the more about this throughout the video, especially in the character creation section. I just wanted to convey how the co-op would work. The difficulty of the enemies will scale with the number of teammates you have, and not just a bigger health bar either. It would be more along the lines of extra enemy numbers and more advanced types. So for example, in single player there may be a ghoul reaver accompanied by 3 ghouls with 3 teammates. That could be a glowing one accompanied by 2 ghoul reavers and 5 ghouls, something like that. Ultimately, there still could be problems that arise in co-op. It's a hard thing to tackle, but you have to make some compromise to allow for it. And you know what? If you really don't want to work with others and you think your friends will just ruin everything, then play by yourself. It is still going to be a perfectly good single-player RPG with companions and all that you would love about Fallout. We've got to have a cool intro video. Just look at Fallout 1, 2, 3, 4, and New Vegas. All had a cool intro video that sets the tone of the game, gives you a little sneak preview for what's to come. Whatever tone that 76 was trying to set with their intro video is quickly diminished because you can hear other players having an argument with their mum, and the lack of any characters to attach to it, it just feels uninspiring. Before the actual start of the game, you join a lobby with friends and start a save game together, or you do it by yourself. You will all start in a separate room of Vault 76, your own bedroom. You will then create your character's physical appearance. You whack on your Pip-Boy and leave your room. You and your team can now explore the vault. NPCs, actual living vault dwellers, are all around the place. You are encouraged to interact with the other vault dwellers, and you can get into conversations about how crazy the party was on the weekend. There will be various dialogue choices to allow for role-playing. Dialogue options like "I drank too much" or "I got an early night's sleep," etc. After a few minutes of this, the Overseer comes on the intercom and announces that Reclamation Day has begun, and that all vault dwellers are to report to the requisition room for assessment and assignment. You go to this room and are directed to a computer to log in and register, but there seems to be an error which has erased your information. You will have to enter your info manually. This is where you will be building your character and all their stats. So in our ideal Fallout 76, we would return to the leveling system of old: skills, special stats, and traits. I talked extensively about this in part 1, but essentially skills are all the basic, more boring stuff like weapon damage, hacking ability, stuff like that. Special stats all start at 5, and you have 5 points to allocate. You can shuffle these around as much as you like, but this allows you to create an actual build and play a certain role and type of character, which is especially important in a co-op game, allowing you and your team, if you have one, to play different roles, making up for individuals' weaknesses. For example, having an intelligent and charismatic but weak character who buys and sells all the gear and heals and buffs the team, and also having a stealthy lockpicking sniper character and a melee brute who carries all the heavy stuff and perhaps uses big guns. We also have the return of traits, which are more or less signature perks that allow you to define your character even further. Perhaps you need glasses and get perception bonuses from wearing them. Perhaps you are good-natured, increasing all your skills like speech and medicine, but decreasing your combat skills. Perhaps you are limber and fragile, giving you increased agility, but suffer more limb damage. Traits do a good job of helping define your character. Before we move on, I want to talk about leveling. Upon every level, up to the level cap of 50, you will be able to increase your skills, the amount of which is determined by intelligence, and every second level you can pick a perk. Now, picking a perk every second level is more balanced and completely fine when there are perks that are powerful and worth using. For sure, it would suck if you had to pick a perk only every second level and you have to pick Rifleman rank 2. Not this time. Gun damage would be relegated to the skill guns. Same for everything else. We also want to do away with this need to add excessive ranks. 5 ranks of this, 3 ranks of this. No, that's just not exciting. Picking a perk to get 10% more damage is not rewarding. If I spend a point in Goat Legs, I don't want to have to spend another perk point in it to get it better. I think perks should be more impactful on the get-go. So if you take the perk card Goat Legs in Fallout 76, at 2 ranks, it decreases fall damage by 80%. So instead, we would have a perk called Goat Legs that instantly gives you the full 2 ranks worth 80% fall damage reduction. Or if you picked Cannibal, it would instantly give you the equivalent of all 3 ranks. By level 50, you will only be able to have picked 25 perks, and they will all be unique and advantageous, not just Stimpaks heal you 10% more. Martial Artist would instantly give you the 30% weapon speed and melee weapon weight reduction instead of having to get 3 ranks. Also, intense training would be back with 10 ranks, so you can add 10 more special points, but at the opportunity cost of perks, and you can't max all your special stats. Additionally, perks would once again have special stat and skill requirements. This actually allows you to make builds and play a defined role. This makes co-op a fun experience and encourages working together, but also from a single player perspective, it increases the replayability. Each experience of the game would be different. You can also have companions to counter your weaknesses, like you could in previous games. Anyways, you finish making your character, you are given equipment based on your special stats, traits, and skills. For example, if you're an explosives melee character, you may be given a frag grenade and a security baton. If you picked the 4 eyes trait, you are given glasses. If you have high intelligence, you're given a Vault-Tec lab coat. If you are an energy weapons character, you're given a laser pistol. Just small variations in equipment, but nothing too unbalanced, just a small head start for your build. Everyone, however, will receive a 10mm pistol with a bit of ammo. After your assessment and requisition, you are directed to the vault door among other vault dweller NPCs. The overseer gives a short speech talking about how generations of excellence have led to this moment. Remember, this game is set 160 years after the Great War, and announces the main objective, which is to set up a settlement with access to water and food. The vault opens and you are greeted with a beautiful vista of the Appalachia. Vault dwellers around are crying with happiness and amazement at seeing the real world for the first time in their lives. You talk to the head of security and then he sends you and your team ahead to clear what they believe is a good spot for a settlement. This is basically going to be where the overseer's camp was in Fallout 76. You head down there and clear some feral dogs that attack you, but then you are approached by a man in a kind of modified SWAT looking outfit. He is initially wary of you, but after dialogue you explain that Vault 76 has opened. He introduces himself as Easton Myers, one of the responders, the military and security branch of the Free State Confederacy. At this point, this will mean nothing to you, but all will be revealed in time and also in the factions section of this video. You follow Easton to the town of Flatwoods after he explains that civilization is all well and good. He brings you to the mayor, he introduces himself, and you can ask him all kinds of lore questions about the area. The mayor welcomes the vault dwellers and asks for their location and sends Easton to bring them to Flatwoods. You are then encouraged to rest and the next day begins. Upon morning, you go to the overseer in a building in Flatwoods giving shelter to the vault dwellers. She talks to you expressing that this is not what she was expecting. Societies have been rebuilt. There's a bunch of dialogue here, but at the end she basically gives you and your team a mission, which is to learn more about the world, explore, bring back information, and discover all that you can. Now this isn't actually a quest, just a directive. By now you can level up for the first time and you are set loose on the world. You or your team will be known as one of those vault dwellers. You can go talk to the mayor or just walk off anywhere, go to other towns, do side quests, all well crafted. There is no urgency. We would ideally design a huge, expansive, diverse world, and the main premise of the game is to explore it. Eventually you can join certain factions and get wrapped up in varying ideologies and characters and stories, but you are no longer handheld beyond this point. The main story has many different entry points through different factions that sort of lead into an overarching problem and plot. Also, as a side note, you can still use the camp system and make a camp with your friends, building anywhere, but we don't actually want workshop settlements because everywhere one of those exists, it replaces a spot where quality locations, characters, quests, and story could be. So that's it. Welcome to Appalachia, the world of Fallout 76, our ideal version. So now with the introduction to the world out of the way, we have to talk all about the world. We are talking factions, locations, quests, characters, stats, gameplay, the works. But first we're going to give you a general overview, a taste of the world, using the map I made, outlining rough ideas of territories and how all the people interact. So first I think we are going to talk factions, their ideologies, motivations, history, stuff like that, and give you a really good grasp of the world. Welcome to Appalachia, year 2237. The world is populated by many different peoples, all who have overcome trials and tribulations of a post-apocalyptic world in their own way. The Enclave returns, having been secured in the underground bunker at White Springs, the Shivat, a tribe of spiritually motivated conquerors reviving Hinduism, the seat of their power being at the Palace of the Winding Paths. The Gutstring clan, or the Gutstrings, a tribe occupying the mire, living high up in the trees safely from the creatures below. They are led by a council of elders, all of whom are ghouls. There is the Free State of West Virginia, also known as the Free States or the Confederacy. This is a confederacy of towns unified in their mutual interests of resources, utility, and security. The Responders are the military branch of the Confederacy. There are also the Skybloods, adrenaline junkie ski sword wielding raiders who have refused to change their ways and now suffer as raiding becomes less feasible, with many other powerful factions surrounding them. There are the Molemen clans, various clans constantly warring with each other over the ash heap, while additionally fighting the Free States who wish to plunder their valuable mineral resources. There is also the Bogfoot Tribe, once residents of Cranberry Bog for over a century, but were pushed out by the Enclave and later the Scorch Beasts. Additionally, to the north, criminal refuse from the Free State and overflow from their prison is sent out into the toxic valley to live their pitiful existence. However, amongst the crime and muck, an organization is formed dedicated to undermining the Confederacy, its ranks formed with mostly revenge-driven criminals. Within these larger factions are also smaller and sometimes unrelated factions like the Order of Mysteries or the Cult of the Mothman, which will usually have a branch of side quests. As you can see on this map, there is a rough idea of what each faction's respective territories are like, but this does not mean they have perfect control. Raiders, criminals, gangs, cults, and dangerous radioactive creatures color the map at varying degrees. This world is still very dangerous. Additionally, our ideal Fallout 76 would feature a reputation system, a metric in which the game measures you or you and your team's standing with each of the factions. But with a general idea of the setting, let's get this show on the road, detailing each faction with things like their ideologies, history, just all about them. Additionally, if you guys love the sound of these factions, be sure to let us know in the comments, because we would seriously consider making up fan lore videos all about these factions in much greater detail. I thought it may be best to start the section of this video off with one of the more familiar factions in the Fallout franchise. The Enclave already did exist in some capacity in Fallout 76, so we are going to take the general premise of them being from the Gutstrings bunker and take it in a far more interesting direction. So in the year 2237, the Enclave is still alive and well on the west coast of the United States in their Poseidon oil rig under the command of President Dick Richardson. In Fallout 76, there is an artificial intelligence called Modus that runs the White Springs bunker, and originally there was a United States Secretary of Agriculture, Thomas Eckhart, who was running the place after the war. Without going into too much detail, in the original 76, they all die before the events of Fallout 76. In our version, they don't die at all, but they have remained very isolationist, sending out occasional agents trying to make contact with other remnants of the US government, and also to report on the societies of the surface. In the year 2230, Modus, the White Spring bunker AI, finally manages to establish contact with President Dick Richardson after generations of trying to contact other members of the Enclave. President Richardson reintegrated this isolated group of Enclave into the main chain of command. Vertibirds were sent with a few scientists from the oil rig to study Modus and acquire the information locked in his databases. The scientists, accompanied by a few soldiers who also brought equipment like advanced power armor, which is basically XO1, which would bolster the fighting capacity of the elite squads in White Springs, who only had access to a few suits of T-45 power armor. By the year 2232, after many arguments and friction regarding the chain of command between White Springs leadership and the president, Richardson gave orders to his Enclave personnel in White Springs to pillage what they could from Modus and then plant a nuclear device destroying the bunker, tying up any loose ends. Modus had overheard the communications between the scientists and the president, who had decided that White Springs was in fact a liability. Leopold Eckhart, descendant of Thomas Eckhart and leader of the White Springs bunker, staged a coup against the Enclave scientists and their guards from Poseidon oil rig after they attempted to dismantle Modus. Together with Modus, Leopold executed the scientists and their military personnel, cutting off the president's influence. Disheartened by the president's intentions, Leopold took the Enclave of West Virginia in a new direction, initiating Operation Phoenix, where they would leave their bunker to re-establish civilization and see America rise from the ashes. A thing to note about this group of Enclave is that they are quite small in comparison. There are 3 6-man squads of power-armored troops, all donning advanced power armor. The 3 squads are Epsilon, Tau, and Theta. with Leopold Eckhart personally leading Squad Epsilon. Year 2233, the Enclave emerged, and the 3 squads secured the town of Huntersville. When the Wastelander residents of Huntersville were met with the power armor and energy weapons, they surrendered almost immediately. Martial law was declared, the mayor of Huntersville became subservient to the Enclave and their new goals. The non-combatants of the Enclave came from White Springs and integrated into the town of Huntersville. Connection with the White Springs bunker and modus was maintained, with a few personnel that remained behind. The people of Huntersville were now under strict rule of the Enclave. However, their advanced technology brought many benefits in the realm of energy production, medicine, and resource management. Huntersville's historical problems with the Skybloods ended almost overnight, the raiders never again daring to cross the Enclave after their first brief and bloody encounter with the power-armored units. While the core Enclave and its personnel are few in numbers, they bolster their ranks with the local militia of Huntersville. Many of Huntersville in fact come to love the Enclave for the security and peace they have brought. After learning about the area from the locals, Leopold ordered Squad Theta to set up at Camp Venture to prevent the Gutstring tribals from venturing into newly claimed Enclave territory. Fort Defiance was claimed by Leopold with Squad Epsilon and Squad Tau, along with many recruits from Huntersville. This would be their launching point into Watoga. You see, Watoga was designed as a city of the future by the joint effort of the pre-war government, Robco and Atomic Mining Services. It was to be fully automated with robots performing every public service. By 2234, the Enclave have pushed out the local Bogfoot Tribe that inhabited the land, and they fought through some robots and hacked the central control of Watoga, assuming control of Watoga and its robots. Over the next months, many of Huntersville's residents would come to Watoga, America Reborn, a city of the future. For a year and a half, the city had prospered. Operation Phoenix was a success. Robots were sent to Camp Venture and Huntersville to bolster their ranks and help perform public and military services. However, on the 14th of November, 2235, a tremor was felt. Fissures opened across the cranberry bog and the scorched beasts emerged. Giant, terrifying beasts, mutated pygmy bats. Groups of them assaulted Watoga, slaughtering many of its residents. The robots helped a lot, but they were still no match for a group of angry, awoken scorch beasts. Squads Epsilon and Tau did their darned best to take the beasts down, killing a few, but they ended up having to retreat back to Fort Defiance, escorting all the civilians they could. 4 members of Epsilon and 3 members of Tau died that day, their skeletons still there within their damaged power armor for you to find when you explore Watoga. Eckhart remained in Fort Defiance with Squad Tau, sending the other remaining member of Epsilon, Elena Smith, back to Huntersville to watch over it. Meanwhile, one of Squad Theta in Camp Venture was killed by a Mirelurk Queen and its Mirelurk swarm, having been stuck in thick mud, leaving only 5 remaining members. At some point between now and 2237, Squad Theta captures some Gutstring members, torturing them for information so they can perhaps find out how to eliminate their leadership, preventing organized attacks. When you emerge from the vault, the Enclave have a territory stretching from Camp Venture to Huntersville to Fort Defiance, ever vigilant and one day hoping to reclaim Watoga from the Scorch Beasts. We are going to move on to another faction now, but this section is mainly to give context to the world and where the factions are at ideologically, physically, and situationally. The Gutstring clan, also referred to the Gutstrings, are a large tribe inhabiting the region called the Maya. Your typical Gutstring clansman would be seen in tribal wraps with Mirelurk carapaces, rad toad skins, megasloth hides, and radstag bones decorating their bodies, wielding weapons like bows, spears, blowpipes, crossbows, tomahawks, axes, alongside ballistic weaponry like hunting rifles and double-barrel shotguns. They are very much a hunter-gatherer society. Most homes, and I guess towns, if you could call them that, are built up high in the huge trees found in the Maya, extensively spreading between the canopies with their tents built on wooden platforms. In an area as dangerous as the Maya, the ground filled with bloodthirsty crickets, mirelurks, rad scorpions, ticks, and rad toads, in fact all kinds of radioactive critters, you can see why they built their homes high in the trees. There are a few exceptions, such as the town of Harper's Ferry, where they occupy the buildings of old, their only town in the conventional sense. Haven's Church is the home of the elders of the clan. This church is expanded with tents, wooden fortifications, and tribal aesthetics. The elders of the clan truly are elderly. You see, the oldest, Yamaruk, was born 190 years ago, being 30 years old when his family was rushed into Vault 94. However, Jonathan Price, which is Yamaruk's pre-war name, did not make it into the vault in time. Yamaruk would be left to suffer the torturous transformation into a ghoul. Over time, he came to see his curse as a blessing. He was given immortality, the ability to survive the harshness of the wasteland while he waited for Vault 94 to open. He waited and watched Vault 94 for 33 years, until year 2100 it opened. He would be reunited with his daughter, now 45 years old, and her children. He guides and protects the people, showing them the bountiful hunting grounds of the Maya. He showed them how to be safe in the trees and how to thrive here. Under his guidance, his family and the Vault Dwellers of 94 would become the first of the Gutstring clan. Today, Yamaruk resides in Haven's Church among 5 other elders, all younger than Yamaruk, who had become ghouls through radiation exposure post-war. Yamaruk is missing a right leg, a left eye, plenty of teeth, and his 2 middle fingers on his left hand. He is mostly blind and tended to by priestesses as he sits on his wooden throne, decorated with bone and lavish with hides and ornaments. If he ever walks, crutches are needed. Many of the Gutstring clan expose themselves to a trial of radiation in hope of being chosen and blessed by becoming a ghoul, joining the elders. They do usually die, however. You may think these mere tribals are no match for the surrounding societies, but they have extensive knowledge of the Maya, making them natural hunters of both man and beast. They use guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run style combat to wear down their enemies, while also allowing the creatures and disease of the Maya to do the rest. Before the Enclave emerged, the Gutstring clan were venturing south into Cranberry Bog, coming into conflict with the Bogfoot Tribe, but this all ceased when the Enclave came. The Enclave now hold Camp Venture and actively prevent the Gutstrings from venturing south. The Gutstrings speak a modified English language. They can communicate with your everyday English speaker, but with much greater focus and strain than would be otherwise required. Their language has also expanded beyond that, with certain words invented over time. As I said before, the Gutstrings are skilled hunters, and they make use of all parts of the dead mutated creatures. Blood is a common drink, a better source of hydration than the irradiated or diseased waters. According to them, the bloods of different creatures taste very different. Mirelurk blood in particular is renowned for its flavor among them. The harshness of the Maya has led to a certain practicality, one that involves the consumption of human flesh. They are cannibals, but to them they simply do not distinguish between the flesh of humans or animals. There is no taboo associated. To them, it is all consumption of flesh, of life force. In the north of the Maya, the Shivat trade resources with them at Red Rocket Megastop, trading for the Gutstrings' unique poisons, healing salves, meats, and resources. The Shivat have learnt better to not try and invade the Maya. It is more trouble than it's worth, so they maintain a peaceful trading relationship. The Shivat are an interesting one. For a little context, I'll give you my inspiration. You see, this location, the Palace of Winding Paths, well, this location in the game is based upon the Palace of Gold, a memorial shrine constructed by the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in West Virginia in 1979. In fact, it was part of a larger community called Vrindaban. Anyways, in our ideal Fallout 76, the Palace of Winding Paths is a Hindu temple and a fantastic opportunity for the Hindu religion to gain traction with Americans post-nuclear apocalypse. So in our Fallout universe, this Palace of Winding Paths existed as a temple to Shiva, and nearby was a small Hindu conclave. This small community would struggle and survive the Great War and the apocalypse that followed after. This community would spread the worship of the Trimurti, the divine trinity of Brahma the creator, Vishnu the preserver, and Shiva the destroyer. As time would develop, the teachings of Hinduism would be twisted to a degree, not resulting in a traditional depiction of the gods. For example, in their depictions of Shiva, he is a blue man with 4 arms, one hand holding a spear, one holding a revolver, one holding fire, and the other holding a nuclear warhead. Shiva became the most important to these people, later known as the Shivat. He was revered for his role as the destroyer of a decadent, degenerate society and paving the way for society to be transformed into something enlightened. Until the year 2199, the Shivat were relatively peaceful and sent missionaries to the towns of survivors and encouraged others to come and hear the wisdom of the Trimurti. For this reason, many of the free states worship the Trimurti and the Hindu gods, but in recent years, these people have been been treated poorly by their leaders for reasons you will soon understand. Upon an incident known as the Monaghan Massacre on the 13th of March that year, the Shivat would be changed forever. On this date, a man named Morris incited a riot, blaming the Shivat missionaries for all of Monaghan Town's problems. The specifics have been lost to time, and it is believed that there were some personal vendettas underlying the event, but what resulted was the massacre of 7 Shivat missionaries, including the wife and daughter of the high priest. High Priest Ias was struck by grief and spurned by revenge. He painted his body in blue paint, and wielding a kukri machete, he arrived with his closest allies and kidnapped Morris in the night. They strung him up from the telegraph pole with rope under his arms. Ias then sliced open his stomach and left. When the rest of the town awoke in the morning, they were greeted with the terrifying sight of Morris hanging, with his guts hanging out trailing to the road below. High Priest Ias would then become known as King Ias of the Shivat. It was this series of events that created the Shivat that exist in the time of the game. Fast forward to the year 2237, King Ias recently died, his reign coloured by military expansion and great strides in culture and spiritual development. Monaghan was now ruled by the Shivat, and Morgantown has now been mostly removed from Free State's control, with them struggling to fight back. After King Ias's ventures into the mire and difficulties with the natives, he made a strategic peace with the Gutstring clan, and Red Rocket Megastop became a bustling trading post between the two cultures. King Ias had also pushed back the Skybloods and claimed swaths of territory from the raiders. His son, the newly anointed King Bava, is a brilliant warrior, but is keen to achieve greatness and step out of the shadow of his father. He desperately wants to make his people proud and live up to the greatness of the previous king by crushing all opposition. The Shivat are one of the biggest concerns for the Free States currently. A king of the Shivat is a military and spiritual leader. When High Priest Ias became King Ias, he did not abandon his role as a spiritual teacher. The theme for the Shivat is spiritual warriors, a group motivated by ideology. They are far from raiders in the Mad Max-esque sense that you would know them. However, they are no less terrifying in combat. They often have their skin painted blue or red with patterns of the opposite color painted over. Their aesthetic is very Indian-inspired, wearing tunics and making Indian-like armor out of post-apocalyptic scrap. They do, however, have slight Western mixes in the theme of their weaponry: 357 revolvers, lever-action rifles, 44 magnums. They're all common choices of weaponry among them, all decorated with Hindu motifs. Alongside these weapons, black powder weapons, handmade rifles, and a variety of melee weaponry is used, like bowie knives, spiked knuckles, death tambos, but most commonly kukri machetes. Shivat warriors are trained to use this variety of weaponry effectively. They all learn a martial art called Kalari Payatu, or Kalari for short, which is a real-world martial art. In fact, you and your team can go here and learn this martial art, augmenting how your character's unarmed power attack and receiving certain unarmed combat buffs, similar to how you could learn the Ranger Takedown or Legion Assault in New Vegas. The Shivat are also not innately hostile, as is the case with many of the factions. The context matters. If you were to walk into the middle of the war zone in Morgantown as someone who doesn't look like a Shivat, there is a good chance you will get your head blown off. However, if you were to go to Monaghan, you would be of course initially questioned, but not shot at straight away. These spiritual warriors will be a serious contender for the rulers of the Appalachia. The Free State of West Virginia, colloquially known as the Free States or the Confederacy, is a mutual alliance of multiple West Virginian towns. Originally, after the bombs fell, many smaller factions came together and formed towns on the ruins of West Virginia. The original towns that formed the Confederacy in the year 2173 were Grafton, Point Pleasant, Flatwoods, Morgantown, and Charleston. Morgantown now is mostly lost to Shivat conquerors, however, it still is an active war zone. Additionally, years ago, the Free States organized an expedition into the ash heap to access the rich minerals in the mines. However, they would encounter huge resistance from the Molemen clans. In fact, if the Molemen clans weren't so busy fighting each other, they would have made it impossible for the Free States to get a foothold. The settlements of Welch and Lewisburg are established atop the infrastructure of respective pre-war towns in the ash heap. These are very much frontier towns and are constantly having conflicts with the Molemen. The interesting thing about the Free States States is their unique mobility that comes in the form of a functioning train line. Beginning in the north at Grafton, the train line goes down through Morgantown, which the Free States are barely holding onto, down past Flatwoods through Charleston, and right down into the frontier, stopping at Welch and Lewisburg. The train would go further, but the Big Bend Tunnel has collapsed, preventing the line from continuing to Watauga. This train line has given the Free States a steady advantage in trade and military reinforcement. Each of the towns is governed by a mayor, a leader chosen by the people initially, but this is by no means a democracy. What the mayor says goes, and unless they die, another leader doesn't come about. However, obviously the mayors have to win the love of the people and balance harshness and compassion. Each town also has a sheriff, which is more or less the right hand of the mayor, with a few deputies. The Responders are a faction of the Confederacy made up of militia contributed to by each of the towns and run by General Hampton, who has 3 divisions, each run by a chief. The Responders are responsible for high-level law enforcement, eliminating raiders, running the prison, and also border protection and dealing with other crises like bushfires and other natural disasters. They are trained in first aid, survival, and combat. Their gear is made up from different parts of old firemen, policemen, and ambulance uniforms and weaponry. Police batons, fire axes, 10mm pistols, stuff like that is what they use. Once upon a time, the Responders managed quite well, only really concerned with the Skybloods, adrenaline junkie raiders based in Pleasant Valley that would raid the borders, but once the Shivat came along, an organized force united by an ideology, they had their work cut out for them. Besides the Responders, you have to remember that there is no uniform culture as such. The Confederacy is built upon the mutual benefit of security and resources, leaving each town to very much have its own identity. For example, Flatwoods is an agricultural town. You could see civilians dressed in plaid shirts, with denim suspenders, straw hats and shotguns. That kind of vibe. Charleston would fancy itself as a posh town, revering their Capitol building with marketplaces and homes sprawling within. Rich folk with private bodyguards inhabit the manors and houses that overlook the empty lake. You would get a better feel for each of the towns when you meet more of the characters and do the questlines within them. In Riverside Manor, the Order of Mysteries is still a living secret organization that you can join, and the Cult of the Mothman is active in Point Pleasant, secretly operating. There will be a few of these mini factions among the Free States, like the Big Game Hunters, a small group of hunters who take down the biggest, baddest creatures of the wasteland for sport, like Mirelurk Queens, with the hope of hunting more legendary ones, like the Mothman, the Grafton Monster, Wendigos, the Flatwoods Monster, and even Scorch Beasts. There is also the Tremerty Temple, a religious faith the same as the Shivat, but not associated with the kingdom. Since the rise of the Shivat as conquerors, the popularity of this faith has diminished greatly and caused many of its members to be persecuted. These are smaller factions that will have their own questline branches, but not necessarily tied to the bigger picture. The land of the Free State is not crime-free. Criminals, raiders, cults, and opportunists cause all kinds of problems throughout the land, and if caught, many of them get thrown in Eastern Regional Penitentiary. The Responders run the prison. Interestingly, there is a decent amount of overflow here, the prison always at near capacity, so what the warden does is decide which prisoners are worth keeping, ones they can ransom or get information out of are kept, and the ones that are basically useless get exiled into the Toxic Valley to the north. This resulted in the untamed Toxic Valley to be filled with gangs and criminals, outcasts of the Free States. But among them is forming an organized resistance, or terrorist group depending on which side you ask, that has been terrorizing Grafton and wishes to undermine the Free States. A resistance built on revenge and retribution. So besides the conflicts with the resistance, the Molemen clans, the Shivat, and the Skybloods, the Free States have had little to no contact with the Gutstrings, Bogfoots, or the Enclave, at least for now, when you start the game. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Skybloods, the last of the big raider gangs. Their base of operations is the top of the world and Pleasant Valley. Let the good times fly and blood rain, a common saying of the Skybloods. They are adrenaline junkie, ski sword wielding, flamethrower spewing, buzzsaw chopping crazies who have a cultural ideal, an almost worship of adrenaline. To be in that heightened crazy state, drugged up on psychos, skiing down a slope while shooting a machine gun at enemies is their version of nirvana. To live and die quietly is their version of suffering. However, their story and theme are about changing times. You see, for over a century, the Skybloods fought with other gangs, took chems, did crazy stuff. They raided farms, towns, took what they wanted. They were the top of the food chain in this violent post-nuclear world. But then, the Free State of West Virginia was formed, and the responders, forcing them to deal with a unified force. No longer could they just raid towns for easy pickings, only having to deal with a few lawmen. Then years later came the Shivat as a kingdom, priests turned conquerors, who took over Monaha and much of the Skyblood territory. The organized warriors of religious conviction were too much for them. One of the last truly successful raiding areas of the Skybloods was Huntersville, but then the Enclave came along and cut them off. The Skybloods are a dying breed, relics of a wilder, more violent wasteland. Societies are rising from the ashes, too organized, too united, leaving no place for the raiding kind. The Skybloods would wish for the old days when they weren't so easily repelled, and they were top dog, not just pests. Bloodbank is their leader, not chosen through democratic vote, not by hereditary succession, but by simply ramming the previous leader's head through a terminal repeatedly until there was nothing but gore left. Bloodbank is 6'5" but quite lanky, possessing a wiry strength. His head is shaved and covered in tattoos, his eye sockets painted black, his long beard is threaded with shotgun shells with holes in the top for the hair to go through. He wields the unique ski sword called Black Diamond. It also uses grenades and a heavy incinerator. He is an absolute chem fiend, Psycho being his absolute favourite. The mole men are mutated humans of the mines in the ash heap. In our version, a unique blend of toxic underground environments, chemicals, and radiation has resulted in these hunched creatures barely capable of communication. In our version, they have a unique mind connection with mole rats, using them like a human would a dog. Remember, things like psychers exist in the Fallout universe. They are very strong and use pretty much the same weaponry as they do in Fallout 76. In our ideal Fallout 76, the mole men are multiple clans occupying different mines and caves, coveting and collecting hordes of precious minerals. While rare, some are able to speak a guttural form of broken English. You and your team will have the opportunity to interact with some, but most are fiercely hostile. 6 clans are known about: the Black Rock Clan, the Longtooth Clan, the Grind Nail Clan, the Red Whisker Clan, the Small Smog Clan, and the Hard Dig Clan. Each clan has tiny aesthetic details that distinguish them from the others, like 2 white stripes on the hood of the Longtooth members, for example, but they're mostly similar in appearance. They relentlessly fight amongst themselves for minerals, as well as fighting the Free States that have now inhabited Welch and Lewisburg. In our game, it would even be possible to resolve the fighting amongst the clans and have them fight the Free States United. Finally, we have the Bogfoot Tribe, a tribe that inhabited the Cranberry Bog region, originating from Vault 96. Cranberry Bog has been their ancestral home for many, many generations. They are dependent on the land, and the giant mutated sundew groves are places of spiritual reverence for them. Cranberries and the bogs they are grown in became of great practical and spiritual significance. Cranberries were a huge part of the Bogfoot diet, along with radtoads, radstags, and various other creatures. The Bogfoots also managed herds of Brahmin that they also used for dairy, making a cranberry juice and Brahmin milk mix that they drink. They also make a sour, kefir, yogurt-like substance out of cranberry milk. Before the Enclave or the Scorch Beasts came, the Bogfoots traded with Huntersville and the few farmers in the area, trading their cranberries, dairy, and their byproducts for weaponry. They avoided Watoga, a taboo place filled with metal devils that would blast you on sight, at least from their perspective. The Bogfoots also had to deal with the substantial Deathclaw population, and this was done by sneaking through the natural crevices and gutters throughout the bog. The greatest of the Bogfoot warriors wore Deathclaw gauntlets made from the bones of their kills. Unlike most tribals, they have a relatively extensive knowledge of firearms and their creation that has been passed down through generations. Various forms of pipe weapons are commonly used and made, and many other ballistic weapons have been acquired and maintained. A typical Bogfoot camp is spread over a decent amount of area, with Brahmin tied to poles being milked, pots of boiling cranberries are over the fire, filling the air with a sweet aroma. Like the Gutstrings, they have a broken modified English, but they can communicate with typical English speakers. They do tend towards a soft matriarchy, with a council of matriarchs being head of the tribe. A lot of their theme has to do with life and life-giving, relating it back to the innate power of mothers, the tribe depending on the milk from Brahmin, which are obviously lactating female cows. Cranberries are gifts from Mother Earth, as are the passages that allowed them to avoid the death claws. They have had little to no conflict with other tribes, bar the occasional altercation with the Gutstrings, but of course, this all changed when the Enclave came and occupied the area, and later when the Scorch Beasts came. The Bogfoots were forced to retreat up to southern Savage Divide, closer to their long-forgotten home, Vault 96. So that is the factions for the moment. Like we mentioned previously, if you would like to see expanded lore videos on our creations, then head on down into the comments below and let us know. But regardless, let's get on with the video. Now, we touched on role-playing and gameplay in previous sections, but we want this game to be a true RPG, one where you can play all different kinds of characters alongside your teammates who are also role-playing different characters, which, if anything, I think is ultimately a really powerful mechanic and a huge advantage of co-op. You can totally play a pacifist character. I mean, you would normally have to do a lot of sneaking or running in other Fallout games, but with teammates, you can have bodyguards, characters who just don't care about killing. So if you want to play some kind of holy priest build who doesn't engage in violence, you could. The co-op part of this game actually adds so much to the role-playing experience, especially when it's facilitated by in-game mechanics. For example, one of your team may have higher perception because they are a sniper-focused build, and you're a high charisma build, usually the smooth talker, but when you encounter the Gutstring or Bogfoot Tribe members, there is a bit of difficulty in understanding them. However, because of your sniper buddy's high perception stat, he actually has special dialogue options that can progress the conversation because he can understand what the tribals are trying to say because he's so perceptive. So a team conversation with a high perception character almost acting as a translator and a high charisma smooth talker could be an awesome combination. One of our main goals with the co-op experience is to encourage people to take different roles in a team. If you were all to play an average all-rounder character, you wouldn't be taking advantage of the system. The co-op experience would be optimal with multiple different polarized roles, a team made up of the frail but smart and silver-tongued character, the strong but stupid, the eagle-eye sniper, but with the personality of a spoon, and the quick-shot gunslinger who couldn't hold anything heavier than a pistol. It's these kind of combinations that could really let the story and world play out in an awesome direction. It also creates a dependency between the team and encourages teamwork. It's a true co-op RPG experience. Dialogue is a crucially important area in an RPG. It's how you can express your character, make your choices, understand the world, and much more. Fallout 76 totally lacks it, but in our ideal 76 there would be lots of dialogue and variations akin to the original Fallout games and also New Vegas. If you pick one intelligence, you are full-on mentally handicapped, and this will be reflected in dialogue. For example, you won't be able to pick up on sarcasm, similes, or metaphors. Figures of speech fly right past you, you would be very literal. For example, in New Vegas, when an NCR ranger refers to the Legion as snakes, your character with one intelligence in dialogue quite literally thinks that he is referring to actual animal snakes. There are quite a few examples of this in New Vegas, and if you were to look at Fallout 1 and 2, that took it to a whole new level. I would really like it to be like New Vegas, perhaps turned up a notch, but then again, it could probably be taken as far as Fallout 1 and 2, where you are practically full-on Neanderthal at 1 intelligence, but if anything, because of the co-op feature, it would be much more fun. So instead of playing a borderline Neanderthal by yourself, you can be playing with your teammates who aren't so stupid. So you could have some kind of master blaster duo, brains and brawn, balancing each other out. Our aim with dialogue would be to have it filled with speech checks. Of course, one's determined by your speech skill, but also other skill checks like New Vegas had, explosives, guns, lockpick, medicine, science. Checks for these kinds of skills give your character a unique way to express themselves in dialogue and also provide extra solutions that are contextual to your character. A character with 100 in the science skill should be able to provide some quick solutions and problems through dialogue rather than going to have to fetch whatever items the quest giver thought he needed. Also, these checks should be a part of the physical world, being able to fix things without replacement parts if you have a high repair skill, or being able to treat injured patients with a high medicine skill, or being able to gain access to gun merchants' special inventory with a high gun skill. Stuff like that in the world gives your character, the role that you play, a unique experience. Another huge part of role-playing games for us is choice and the ability to steer the game the way you want. Theoretically, if you wanted to make peace, or at least a relatively peaceful outcome for all the factions, you possibly could. Or you could kill every single NPC, or leave one faction alive. It's all up to you. Imagine a scenario where you somehow convince the Skybloods, the crazy raiders, to abandon West Virginia in search of adrenaline elsewhere, and through your diplomacy you integrate the Bogfoot Tribe into the population of Huntersville under the leadership of the Enclave, and then you usher a peace between the Free States and the Shivat, perhaps by helping a different ruler come to the lead. You could convince the Free States to withdraw from the Ash Heap, leaving the Moleman clans to themselves. The Gutstrings could be convinced to stick to their territory in the Mire. All kinds of potential peaceful outcomes. I'm in no way saying this would be an easy outcome to produce. It should probably take more than just a guy with high speech. Or you could decide you like certain factions more than others, or help two team up and kill the rest. Imagine various endings such as the Free States and Enclave teaming up, killing the rest, and establishing a new America. Or you could intentionally weaken or destroy other factions so that the Skybloods can return to the old days of being top dog raiders with Appalachia under their heel. Or you could help the Shivat conquer the Free States and usher in a spiritual enlightenment to the self-serving and soulless heretics. The point is that we want the player or players to have an actual agency in the world. They have a meaningful impact on how the game world plays out. This is what people play RPGs for. In terms of gameplay, this game would be much like 76, the gunplay and how it feels to move and stuff like that. I mean, in our ideal Fallout 76, I would want it to feel better, but there isn't much to say about that. Better feeling guns, better movement, better graphics, stuff like that's always better. But we want to talk about the core gameplay features. People will suffer through average gunplay and movement for an incredible RPG experience. Just look at Fallout New Vegas, for example. The core of an RPG, the core of a Fallout game, should be dealing with a post-apocalyptic environment and its inhabitants. People want to be able to do good quests with fantastic characters. They want to be able to roleplay a character in a world. You want to be a raider who kills everyone and anything for a few caps or a sip of water? Done, you can do it. Want to be a lawman struggling to bring justice to the wasteland? Done, you can do it. Want to do a ton of chems and try and party non-stop? You can do that too. Think it, you can do it. This should be the focus of our ideal Fallout 76. No longer would it be a scrapathon where the main focus is exploring, collect junk, craft and repair stuff, rinse and repeat. If repairing weapons and armor was a system that remains, then we would allow 3 options. Repair using junk, repair using the same type of weapon like you could in previous games, or go to a vendor, an actual human NPC who will repair it for caps. In that you can see how 3 different types of characters may go about repairing. The rich charisma bartering character goes off and gets his stuff repaired for cheap. The guy who likes exploring and collecting junk goes and repairs his stuff that way, and the raider who kills and collects would repair using similar weapons. They are just examples of different ways to complete the same objective. As you can probably tell by now, player freedom and choice is incredibly important to us, and we think it is vitally important to a good Fallout game, hence why we are so desperate to have it included. Also, as we kind of already talked about in the previous sections, leveling would be like the older entries in the series. The special stats would perform roles very similar to New Vegas, but some would have to be changed slightly for co-op. For example, Charisma in New Vegas affected a metric called Companion Nerve. Companion Nerve basically buffed your companions, and we would like this to apply for your player teammates, but obviously this has to be augmented for balance reasons. So it may be of great benefit to have a squad leader kind of role who has high charisma providing buffs through Companion Nerve. Gameplay encompasses a lot which needs to be balanced, tried, and tested, which you can't really do without a game. However, in terms of core functions of gameplay, I think we've made our opinion very clear. Our ideal Fallout 76 is a game about freedom. Like we said, beyond the initial tutorial, once you're with the Overseer in the town of Flatwoods, there is zero hand-holding. The world is your oyster. Figure it out, go do quests, explore the world. There is no urgency, no main quest pushing you towards your next objective because the world needs saving immediately. You can enter the overarching story from many different points. The overarching plot is twofold: control of the Appalachia and also the plight of the Scorch Beasts. Everyone wants control of the Appalachia because who doesn't want to dominate resources and have security and peace in their own unique way? Of course, that way differs a lot. The Free States would have all of Appalachia to be part of their confederacy to ensure a safer and secure West Virginia. The Shivat would have heretics bend or break to the will of Shiva, if you were to ask King Bava, but his sister Sonali paints a different picture, wishing to end the wars and bring peace between the cultures. Her belief is that the very existence of the Palace of the Winding Paths is proof that vastly different cultures can coexist. The Skybloods want an Appalachia where they can be top dog again, and the Enclave want to bring back a golden age, America reborn, and of course there would be multiple different combinations of alliances that can be achieved. We won't be able to talk about all the quest lines in great detail, that would take more than just the week we made this script in, but we will give a brief overview of some. Ultimately, besides the control, there is a problem that remains for any faction that rules. The Scorch Beasts are multiplying and they will spread further, dooming the land. You, with factions of your choice or of your own volition, can enter one of the fissure sites and track the cave networks to the Scorch Beast Queen in its lair and kill it so it can no longer give birth to more. Or it could be goaded out with the help of others and then killed, but there's going to be a lot more nuance to that story, but that's just an overview. And it also isn't necessarily the end of the game, it's just one of the two main overarching problems. Theoretically, you could go and help the Enclave kill it without really resolving the issue of faction wars in the Appalachia. So one person's experience could be that this hunting of the Scorch Beast Queen happens halfway through the game. For another player, it could occur at the end of the game, after the Shivat have conquered all of the Appalachia and now realize they have a problem with the Scorch Beasts. This also helps replayability massively, as every time you play there will be a different order of things, a path you didn't know you could take, keeping the game fresh for many playthroughs. You get an idea of the main storylines quite easily from the faction's goals. Side quests, on the other hand, are everywhere. When you get to Point Pleasant, you can uncover the secret Mothman cult that believes it is their god, sacrificing a child every year to the creature. They believe it protects the town from danger at the cost of a child sacrifice, and in a way it does, reinforcing the name Point Pleasant. The town has never had problems with raiders or violent creatures. You can help the cult, convince them there is another way, kill the cult, expose the cult to the town, you can find an alternative sacrifice, you can kill the Mothman, or you can even feed the cult to the Mothman. Many different choices and outcomes. I thought it would be cool if you do kill the Mothman or stop the cult from sacrificing the child, the radioactive creatures start attacking Point Pleasant, indicating that maybe the Mothman really did keep them safe. Or perhaps it's just coincidence. The Order of Mysteries is alive and well, and through various methods you can join them and play out a superhero-inspired questline that deals with the corruption of the mayor in Charleston. You could also fight in an arena in Shivat territory, fighting fearsome warriors to the death or captive creatures. One of those fearsome opponents would be a Vault 87 super mutant who had wandered to Appalachia and was caught and used in the arena as a beast. This is the only super mutant you will ever encounter in the game, and the Shivat wouldn't refer to it as anything but some strange monster, as they aren't familiar with super mutants. This is important because we don't need to or want to reuse or cram in every faction or enemy type that has ever existed. Vault 87 in Washington DC is close enough in proximity to West Virginia that after 100 years it's believable that some have wandered this far. The only other mention of super mutants is by the Gutstrings' vague mention of giant yellow men that come from the east, occasionally attacking villages and kidnapping some. This kind of world building adds context to Fallout 76 within the Fallout franchise without having to rely on old brand images. We want Fallout 76 to have its own identity within the franchise, not just a rehash of it. The Wendigo would be a single instanced creature, same as the Grafton monster, with quest lines surrounding each creature, giving each a certain mystique and personality. As another quest line, you could work for a trading caravan. You and your teammates hired on to guard a caravan traveling from Flatwoods through Huntersville, and even to Red Rocket Megastop. You could just protect them like you were paid to, or you could tip off the Skybloods and help them raid the caravan. Or you could tip off the Skybloods, then kill the Skybloods and convince the caravan to double your pay for your fantastic protection of them. Options. That's what we want in all our quests. Options. I hope you guys now have a pretty good idea of what we would like our ideal Fallout 76 to look like. I could go on for hours and hours about what we would do in great detail, and like I said, let us know in the comments below if you would like us to make separate fanfiction lore videos. We love getting creative here at FudgeMuppet, and we hope you guys enjoy that as well. Also, remember timestamps are below in the description to every single section of the video, so if you want to refer back to a section or hear something again, use those. Also, if you are responding to to or discussing a certain section, probably best to timestamp so we know exactly what you are responding to. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is our ideal Fallout 76, as well as pretty much everything wrong with the original Fallout 76. We are thinking of live streaming a Q&A session in a few weeks after this video, responding to comments and getting into some discussion about Fallout 76 and our ideal version. As you can tell, we are very passionate about Fallout and other huge expansive worlds like the Elder Scrolls and many others that we don't necessarily make videos on. We are also 100% down to make more ideal videos like this, like an ideal Fallout Wyoming or an ideal Fallout Seattle, other made up Fallout games. As well, we are probably going to do some of these ideal vids for potential Elder Scrolls locations. Please do like the video if you enjoy what we do here. It lets us know you want more, and do subscribe for more lore, builds, and other creative videos just like this. We are so blessed to be able to do this as our full-time job, and we have you guys to thank for enjoying and supporting our stuff. So thank you. My name is Scott from FudgeMuppet. I work alongside Michael and Drew to bring you the best we can. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll be back to nerd out with you again next time.